Hello, I'm Marilla Sargent, Vice President and Branch Manager of the Montlake Terrace office of Home Street Bank. Home Street Bank is proud to sponsor these videos, which will help the voters make an informed choice in the November elections.
Welcome to Vote 2017. I'm Teresa Whipple, and I'm here with Port of Edmonds Commission candidate Lora Petso, who's running for position District 3. I knew I'd get that right eventually. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about a variety of issues, but first I'd like you to talk about your background and why you're running for Port Commission.
Okay, thanks. I'm a longtime Edmonds resident and a longtime community volunteer. I have an economics major from Whitman College and a law degree from the University of Washington School of Law. I've served as an elected official now for 22 years, including 10 years on the Edmonds City Council, well, nearly 10 years on the Edmonds City Council. And I am running for Port Commission because during filing week, as I was mulling over running for council, I got a lot of contacts saying, please run for Port. Okay. And I think the primary motivation is run for Port to protect the marsh.
Okay, right. Well, and you will not be surprised by the fact that we're going to have some questions about the marsh today.
Good.
Yeah. And as we were talking about earlier, given your background as a former city council member, you have some unique perspectives about the relationship with the port and with the marsh and everything else. So let's talk a little bit about, first of all, as I've been hearing in recent months and probably before that, but there's been some rhetoric about the port not caring about the environment and that they're more interested in development than in protecting the marsh and other environmental concerns. And I wondered what you would say to those who have that perception. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Well, there's even a more interesting twist to it, which is that maybe we can try to protect the marsh through development as well. So right. there's yet a third take on it. But, you know, the reality is that the marsh buffer needs to be sufficient to protect the habitat that we have there. And that's independent of, and it can be independent of, you know, what fits with existing land uses or planned land uses or desired land uses. It's not a factor of, gee, I think 20 is good, I think 30 is good. The Department of Ecology had some pretty, you know, set rules. Mm-hmm. If you don't have other information to push you in a different direction, then here's what the minimum should be. Mm-hmm. And the applicable minimum for Edmonds was 150 feet. Not 25, not 50, not even 110. Council, under pressure from both sides, picked a compromise at 110 and left open a back door for a scientific study that might determine a different appropriate number. But it has to be ecologically sound, ecologically desirable. It can't be, oh, you know, I'd rather it was here, or, you know, my plans work better if it's there. That's not really where the marsh decision needs to be. The marsh decision needs to be on what it takes to protect that ecosystem. Okay,
very good. And kind of a follow-up question to that, and you were on the council when a lot of this came down. Mm-hmm. The Harbor Square plan that the port had come up with that ended up being considered by the council that proposed some fairly significant redevelopment there with some multi-use buildings and some taller buildings than what we're used to seeing and residential there. What do you, as a port commissioner, if you're elected, what do you think is the appropriate kind of next steps for Harbor Square and development? And is it residential? Is it no residential? What do you think?
You know, that's really interesting the way you phrased that too, because I'm going to try to find it here, but in the port plan, which is still adopted by the port, it is their current master plan. It was adopted March 10th, 2014. And on the first page of it, it says public outreach, phase 2, and it says completed. And I would argue, given what's gone on over the past 3 or 4 years, that the public outreach phase is not completed. We have people who want one use, people who want another use, some people like me who want all the uses, some people who want this buffer, others who want that buffer, some people who want to wait and see what happens once we've daylighted Willow Creek. Now where's the marsh? Now what are the habitat needs? All of it legitimate. So I would suggest as a next step that the Port Commission repeal this plan, revoke this plan, whatever, take this plan off their books and begin a public process of improvements to the plan. Not, I want this and I get to get my way, and so wants that and they get to get their way, but see if we as a community can improve the plan. And I'm pretty sure we can, given all the information we've gained.
Okay. And I've heard varying opinions on the issue of residential in that area. What do you think about that?
That's going to be fair game for the public process, because a lot of people were looking at it as transit-oriented development, and other people are saying, how long can Sound Transit be there, given that it's maybe losing money? Other people say, well, if we don't have residential, then we can have more environmental education on the site. Yeah. Other people are saying, no, it's a big site. Let's see if we can accommodate everybody's goals and interests there. I certainly would not be pushing for residential, but if that were the outcome of the public process, then you'd figure out how to accommodate it in the plan. But it's also kind of unusual, I think, for a public agency to be devoting property to residential. It's more of a private developer function. And if you do put residential development on public property, I assume that the public property remains tax exempt. So, like, the city's not going to be able to tax the property if it's still owned by the port. It's only going to be able to tax the structures, which is kind of an unusual situation. And again, through the public process, this should all shake out as to whether, considering all the various angles, this is where we really want to go. But certainly, there are a lot of people who think it should go that way, and there's a number of people who think it shouldn't.
Yeah, I've certainly heard a wide range of opinions on that topic. And some things you said earlier point to this next question, which is, my perception has been that there has been a fair amount of tension between the port and the city over the years, in particular the commissioners and the council members. And do you think that's a fair assessment? And if so, do you think that's something that can be improved upon, or is it just kind of that natural tension that goes with two agencies that kind of have different missions?
No, I think it can definitely be improved upon, and particularly with a little motivation from each side. I certainly know at least one thing the port could do to improve it from the port side, and so if I'm elected, I will make that suggestion. And
you're going to share that with us?
I wasn't, but okay, here we go.
Heard it here first.
After a lengthy review process before City Council, the port withdrew its application, and after several months of continued deliberation, it was summarily rejected by the City Council. Okay, I find that a little bit odd, because I would think that after a lengthy process, nothing can be summarily rejected. My understanding of summarily is it means, prompt, quickly, that sort of thing. But it continues that the Harbor Square Master Plan has been adopted and approved by the Port Commission. However, until such time as the City Council may invite a more reasonable outcome, ...
So this is Port minutes?
This is the Port Master Plan.
Oh, okay, in the plan itself.
It's in the plan. It's
Okay,
like putting
got it.
something like that in the comp plan. So I think a very good first step on all sides would be apologies all around, and then let's take out the bit about, council not being reasonable, and let's figure out what we agree on. There's a lot of things we could agree on that we want to see happen at that site. And of course, in my particular case, I'm hoping the voters agree that we want to protect the marsh.
Okay, very good. So I know that there's, talk with people who've said the port, is doing well financially, but there are certainly some challenges coming up. There's a lot of things that they'll be facing, and you've been studying, I'm sure, some of the issues. And what do you think are maybe one of the biggest challenges they might be facing in the future?
Oh, that's really interesting. Mainly, I think they're facing constant change, constant change in boating interests, constant change in economic development circumstances, constant change with regulations, and you just have to plan your approach. And there's so many issues. It's really exciting to look at the various things you get to go learn about. I don't have a lot of knowledge at this point about how to run a fueling operation for boats, right? But I can tell that I would want to learn how we make it safe and how we make sure we don't pollute. And it's very exciting. It's a complex and interesting business, and I think they're going to be facing continuing changes because demographics change, circumstances change. Whoever you talk to changes. One person says, yeah, we need more guest moorage. Another person will tell you, no, guest moorage is pretty good, but we need more larger slips, smaller slips, you name it. And it's been very fun as an announced port candidate to have people come forward and tell me about the things they'd be interested in seeing down there at the port.
Interesting. Okay. And what, in looking at it as an outsider looking in to an extent, what do you think you could point to the port has done well?
On the whole, the port has got a great staff. I've read all the minutes for the past couple of years. On 2 separate council terms, I had opportunities to serve as liaison to the port, and I am very impressed with the input that they get from, the guidance they get from their staff. It's not always that easy, for example, to explain a complicated financial thing to a group of elected officials from different backgrounds. But if you have a finance person that can do that, it makes everything a lot easier for everybody. And so it's just really fun.
Okay, good. What about tourism? I know that's something that the port has been delving into quite a bit lately. We've got the whale watching boats down there. Is there anything else that you think the port could do to increase tourism?
I don't have any specific ideas on that issue. I hadn't thought about it, but it is definitely one of my, and has always been, even as a council member, one of my preferred economic development alternatives. I just love the idea of people coming here, leaving their money, and going home at the end of the day or at the end of the weekend, happy and satisfied with their visit to Edmonds. And it provides benefits for our citizens, too. So I, for example, now have the opportunity to very easily and conveniently go on a whale watching thing rather than having to travel to who knows where so that I can go whale watching. So I'm really pleased with the emphasis on tourism. As you know from your time on the Economic Development Commission, that's always been one of my favorite, preferred avenues for economic development.
Very good. Okay. Well, we've come to the point where you now have an opportunity to directly address the voters and tell them why they should vote for you. So please feel free.
Okay, fantastic. I am running to protect the marsh. I'm not intending to impose upon the marsh and encroach upon the marsh with development or buildings or worry about what constitutes the least we can do, where no net loss is, where taking is. My goal is to protect the marsh and the marsh ecosystem, and then look at what we're going to do with the other port operations. And my ask of the voters is not only to please consider voting for me, but to also, if you have not yet done so, visit the marsh or Google saltwater marshes and find out why there are so many people around town who think this marsh is so very important and that the marsh ecosystem is really something that we need to preserve.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Laura. I really appreciate you coming in, and best of